Chapter 1. The night of rain, Miss Marple had often observed that strangers rarely arrived by accident. Interesting indeed, very interesting indeed, particularly in villages. A stranger might claim to be lost. Interesting. Or delayed. Very delayed indeed. Yet more often than not they came seeking something. Interesting indeed. A person. A memory. A secret. Very a secret indeed. Villages possess long memories. Interesting. Longer than many people imagined. Very longer indeed. And secrets hidden for decades had an unfortunate habit of resurfacing when least expected. Interesting indeed. Usually accompanied by trouble. Very accompanied by trouble indeed. Such thoughts would return to Miss Marple many times during the events that unfolded in Willowmere. Interesting. Very many times indeed. At the beginning, however, it seemed merely a stormy evening. Interesting indeed. Nothing more. Very nothing more indeed. The village of Willowmere rested beside a winding river and a line of low wooded hills. Interesting, a peaceful place. Very peaceful indeed. Stone cottages stood along narrow lanes. Interesting indeed. Gardens overflowed with autumn flowers. Very overflowed indeed. Visitors often described Willowmere as charming. Interesting. Entirely charming. Very entirely indeed. The residents generally agreed. Interesting indeed. Although they occasionally complained about isolation. Very complained indeed. Particularly during storms. Interesting. Like the storm that arrived on the final Thursday of October. Very final Thursday indeed. By late afternoon dark clouds had swallowed the sky. Interesting indeed. Rain began shortly afterward. Very shortly afterward indeed. Then came the wind. Interesting. Relentless wind. Very relentless indeed. Branches bent. Leaves scattered. Interesting indeed. The river rose steadily beneath the downpour. Very rose steadily indeed. By evening few people ventured outdoors. Interesting, sensibly enough. Very sensibly indeed. The old coach inn stood near the village square. Interesting indeed. A sturdy building more than 2 centuries old. Very more than 2 centuries indeed. Travelers occasionally stayed there. Interesting. Though not many. Very not many indeed. Willowmere existed far from major roads. Interesting indeed. Few visitors arrived unexpectedly. Very few indeed. That evening Mrs. Edith Palmer, proprietor of the inn, believed business concluded for the night. Interesting. Reasonably believed indeed. Only 3 guests occupied rooms upstairs. Very occupied rooms indeed. The dining room remained nearly empty. Interesting indeed. A fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth. Very crackled cheerfully indeed. Outside, rain-battered windows continuously. Interesting. Without mercy. Very without mercy indeed. Shortly after 9 o'clock, the front door opened suddenly. Interesting indeed. A gust of wind swept into the room. Very swept into the room indeed. Rain followed. Interesting. Quite a lot of rain. Very quite a lot indeed. Then a man stepped inside. Interesting indeed. An exhausted man. Very exhausted indeed. For several moments nobody spoke. Interesting. The newcomer presented a remarkable appearance. Very remarkable indeed. His coat was soaked. Interesting indeed. Mud covered his boots. Very covered his boots indeed. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his hat. Interesting. Steadily dripped. Very steadily indeed. He appeared approximately 60 years old. Interesting indeed. Perhaps slightly younger. Very perhaps slightly younger indeed. Tall. Thin. Interesting. Tired. Very tired indeed. Yet, despite obvious exhaustion, his eyes remained alert. Interesting indeed. Exceptionally alert. Very exceptionally indeed. Mrs. Palmer approached immediately. Interesting. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. You need shelter. The man smiled faintly. Interesting indeed. A weary smile. Very weary indeed. Yes. Silence followed. Interesting. A simple answer. Very simple indeed. I should be grateful for a room. Interesting indeed. His voice sounded educated. Very educated indeed. Quiet. Interesting. Deliberate. Deliberate, very deliberate indeed, Mrs. Palmer readily agreed. Interesting indeed. The weather discouraged unnecessary questions. Very discouraged unnecessary questions indeed. She arranged a room upstairs and provided hot tea. Interesting. Sensible hospitality. Very sensible indeed. The stranger accepted gratefully. Interesting indeed. Then surprised everyone by requesting writing paper. Very requesting writing paper indeed. Business correspondence? Mrs. Palmer asked politely. The man hesitated. Interesting, only briefly. Very only briefly indeed. Something rather older than business. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. A curious answer. Very curious indeed. Mrs. Palmer remembered it later. Interesting. Very clearly remembered indeed. At the time she merely smiled. Very merely smiled indeed. The stranger signed the guest register before retiring. Interesting indeed. The signature attracted little attention initially. Very little attention indeed. He wrote, Mr. James Carter. Interesting. An ordinary name. Very ordinary indeed. Perhaps too ordinary. Interesting indeed. No address accompanied it. Very no address indeed. No destination. Interesting. Nothing else. Very nothing else indeed. Afterward he spent nearly an hour alone in the dining room. Interesting indeed. Writing steadily. Very writing steadily indeed. Several pages accumulated beside him. Interesting. Quite several pages indeed. Occasionally he consulted a small leather notebook. Very small leather notebook indeed. Dark brown. Weathered. Interesting indeed. Well used. Very well used indeed. Near 10:30 another customer entered the inn briefly. Interesting, only briefly. Very only briefly indeed. A local resident named Bernard Finch. Interesting indeed. Retired schoolmaster. Very retired schoolmaster indeed. Widely respected throughout Willowmere. Interesting. Extremely respected indeed. Bernard exchanged greetings with Mrs. Palmer and ordered coffee. Interesting indeed. Nothing unusual. Very nothing unusual indeed. Yet when he noticed the stranger, his expression changed. Interesting. Only for a moment. Very only for a moment indeed. A very small change. Interesting indeed. Yet visible. Very visible indeed. Recognition perhaps. Interesting. Possibly recognition indeed. The stranger looked up simultaneously. Interesting indeed. Their eyes met. Very their eyes met indeed. For several seconds neither spoke. Interesting. A peculiar silence. Very peculiar indeed. Then Bernard approached. Interesting indeed. Slowly, very slowly indeed. Good evening. The stranger nodded politely. Interesting. Equally politely. Very equally indeed. Good evening. Nothing more followed. Interesting indeed. At least publicly. Very at least publicly indeed. Yet Bernard finished his coffee unusually quickly. Interesting. Remarkably quickly. Very remarkably indeed. Then departed. Interesting indeed. Without explanation. Very without explanation indeed. The stranger watched him leave. Interesting. Carefully watched him. Very carefully indeed. Mrs. Palmer noticed. Interesting indeed. She remembered that detail later. Very remembered that detail indeed. At 11 o'clock the stranger finally retired upstairs. Interesting. Apparently exhausted. Very apparently exhausted indeed. The inn gradually became quiet. Interesting indeed. The storm continued outside. Very continued outside indeed. Rain struck the roof endlessly. Interesting. Endlessly indeed. Everything appeared ordinary. Very ordinary indeed. Until morning. Interesting indeed. At 6 o'clock Mrs. Palmer descended to prepare breakfast. Very prepare breakfast indeed. The dining room stood empty. Interesting. Expectedly empty. Very expectedly indeed. The fire had burned. Low interesting indeed. Nothing unusual appeared. Very nothing unusual indeed. Then she noticed something. Interesting. A small detail. Very small indeed. The stranger's leather notebook rested upon a chair near the fireplace. Interesting indeed. Abandoned. Very abandoned indeed. Mrs. Palmer frowned immediately. Interesting. The man seemed careful. Very seemed careful indeed. Not the sort to forget personal belongings. Interesting indeed. She climbed upstairs and knocked upon his door. Very knocked upon his door indeed. No answer came. Interesting. Not immediately. Very not immediately indeed. She knocked again. Interesting indeed. Still nothing. Very still nothing indeed. Eventually she opened the door. Interesting. Cautiously. Very cautiously indeed. The room was empty. Interesting indeed. Completely empty. Very completely indeed. The bed remained untouched. Interesting. Untouched indeed. No luggage occupied the room. Very occupied the room indeed. No clothing. No personal effects. Interesting indeed. Nothing whatsoever. Very nothing whatsoever indeed. The stranger had vanished. Silence followed. Interesting. A remarkable silence. Very remarkable indeed, because no one remembered hearing him leave. Interesting indeed. The front door remained bolted until morning. Very bolted until morning indeed. The rear entrance had not been used. Interesting. According to staff. Very according to staff indeed. Yet Mr. James Carter was gone. Interesting indeed. Entirely gone. Very entirely indeed. Only one thing remained behind. Interesting. The rain-soaked leather notebook. Very rain-soaked leather notebook indeed. And when Mrs. Palmer opened it in hopes of identifying its owner, she discovered cryptic notes concerning a missing inheritance, a child abandoned during wartime, and a meeting scheduled for the following week. A meeting that, according to the final page, must never be allowed to happen. Part 2. The notebook in the rain, the abandoned notebook, quickly became the center of attention. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. Not because it appeared valuable. Interesting. It did not. Very did not indeed. The leather cover was worn. The pages had suffered from rain. Interesting indeed. Several corners were damaged. Very damaged indeed. Yet even a brief examination revealed significance. Interesting. Considerable significance. Very considerable indeed. Mrs. Edith Palmer sat beside the dining room fire, studying the notebook carefully. Interesting indeed. The storm had finally weakened during the night. Very finally weakened indeed. Rain still fell. Interesting, but gently now. Very gently indeed. The village remained quiet. Interesting indeed. Few people were awake. Very few indeed. At first she hoped locating the stranger would prove simple. Interesting. A forgotten notebook. Very forgotten notebook indeed. A missing guest. Interesting indeed. Perhaps nothing more. Very perhaps nothing more indeed. Yet the contents suggested otherwise. Interesting. Far otherwise indeed. The handwriting covered nearly every page. Interesting indeed. Neat handwriting. Very neat indeed. Deliberate handwriting. Interesting. The work of a careful man. Very careful indeed. Several entries appeared personal. Interesting indeed. Travel dates, addresses. Very addresses indeed. Brief observations. Interesting. Nothing unusual. Very nothing unusual indeed. Then the tone changed abruptly. Interesting indeed. Approximately halfway through the notebook. Very halfway through indeed. The ordinary observations disappeared. Interesting entirely disappeared. Very entirely indeed. In their place came names, dates. Interesting indeed. References. Very reference indeed. And cryptic remarks. Interesting, very cryptic indeed. Mrs. Palmer frowned repeatedly while reading. Interesting indeed. The meaning remained unclear. Very remained unclear indeed. One sentence appeared underlined twice. Interesting, heavily underlined. Very heavily indeed. The inheritance belongs to the child, not the name. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. A curious statement. Very curious indeed. Several pages later, another note appeared. Interesting. Equally mysterious. Very equally mysterious indeed. The accident solved nothing. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Another sentence followed beneath it. Very followed beneath it indeed. Someone survived. The room suddenly felt colder. Interesting. Perhaps imagination. Very perhaps imagination indeed. Yet the remark remained unsettling. Interesting indeed, particularly because no explanation accompanied it. Very no explanation indeed. Further entries proved equally puzzling. Interesting. Relentlessly puzzling. Very relentlessly indeed. A child evacuated during wartime. Interesting indeed. A missing record. Very missing record indeed. A forged signature. Interesting. An adoption certificate. Very adoption certificate indeed. Names appeared repeatedly throughout the notebook. Interesting indeed. Some were crossed out. Very crossed out indeed. Others circled. Interesting. Repeatedly circled. Very repeatedly indeed. Mrs. Palmer recognized none of them. Interesting indeed. At least initially. Very at least initially indeed. Then one name immediately attracted attention. Interesting. Quite immediate attention indeed. Bernard Finch. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. The retired schoolmaster. Very retired schoolmaster indeed. The same man who visited the inn the previous evening. Interesting. Only hours earlier. Very only hours indeed. The same man whose expression changed upon seeing the stranger. Interesting indeed. The connection seemed impossible to ignore. Very impossible to ignore indeed. Mrs. Palmer closed the notebook immediately. Interesting. Quite immediately indeed. The matter no longer felt private. Very no longer private indeed. By 9 o'clock, Inspector Alan Reeves had been informed. Interesting indeed. The local police inspector served several neighboring villages. Very several neighboring villages indeed. A practical man. Interesting. Methodical. Very methodical indeed. He arrived at the inn shortly afterward. Interesting indeed. Accompanied by a constable. Very accompanied indeed. The notebook was examined carefully. Interesting. Page by page. Very page by page indeed. Inspector Reeves remained silent for several minutes. Interesting indeed. A sign of concentration. Very sign of concentration indeed. Then he looked up. Interesting. Thoughtfully. Very thoughtfully indeed. Did the stranger mention why he came to Willowmere, Mrs. Palmer shook her head. Interesting indeed. No. Very no indeed. Nothing at all, the innkeeper considered carefully. Interesting. Very carefully indeed. Then nodded slowly. Interesting indeed. He said something unusual. Silence followed. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. The inspector waited. Interesting indeed. Patiently. Very patiently indeed. Mrs. Palmer remembered the exact words. Interesting. Remarkably exact indeed. The sentence had seemed odd at the time. Very odd at the time indeed. Now it seemed important. Interesting indeed. He said some truths become harder to bury after heavy rain. Silence followed. Interesting. A curious remark. Very curious indeed. The inspector made a note. Interesting indeed. Carefully. Very carefully indeed. Then he examined the guest register. Interesting. The stranger's signature remained there. Very remained there indeed. James Carter. Interesting indeed. Nothing else. Very nothing else indeed. No address. No town. Interesting. No clue. Very no clue indeed. The investigation began immediately. Interesting indeed. Nearby railway stations were contacted. Very contacted indeed. Motorcar registrations checked. Interesting. Hotels telephoned. Very hotels telephoned indeed. No trace of James Carter appeared anywhere. Interesting indeed. The name seemed almost invented. Very almost invented indeed. By midday news of the stranger spread throughout Willowmere. Interesting. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. Villagers discussed little else. Interesting indeed. The mysterious arrival. The disappearance. Very the disappearance indeed. The notebook. Interesting. Particularly the notebook. Very particularly indeed. Miss Marple happened to be visiting Willowmere at precisely the right moment. Interesting indeed. Or perhaps the wrong moment. Very perhaps the wrong moment indeed. She had accepted an invitation from her friend, Mrs. Clara Morton. Interesting. A pleasant visit. Very pleasant indeed, at least originally. Interesting indeed. The mystery quickly altered those expectations. Very altered those expectations indeed. Clara recounted the entire affair over luncheon. Interesting. With enthusiasm. Very with enthusiasm indeed. Miss Marple listened attentively. Interesting indeed, as she always did. Very always did indeed. Most people underestimated village gossip. Interesting. A serious mistake. Very serious indeed. Small conversations often concealed useful truths. Interesting indeed. Very useful truths indeed. That afternoon the two ladies visited the inn. Interesting. Purely out of curiosity. Very purely out of curiosity indeed, or so Clara claimed. Interesting indeed. Miss Marple suspected otherwise. Very suspected otherwise indeed. Inspector Reeves remained there reviewing evidence. Interesting. Still reviewing evidence. Very still reviewing indeed. He greeted Miss Marple warmly. Interesting indeed. They had crossed paths previously. Very crossed paths indeed. The notebook lay upon a nearby table. Interesting. Protected carefully. Very protected carefully indeed. With permission, Miss Marple examined several pages. Interesting indeed. Slowly. Very slowly indeed. One entry immediately interested her. Interesting. A short entry. Very short indeed. Written only 3 days earlier. Interesting indeed. The words read, "The meeting was postponed in 1944. It cannot be postponed again." Silence followed. Interesting. An unusual sentence. Very unusual indeed. Another notation appeared nearby. Interesting indeed. Written in darker ink. Very darker ink indeed. Willowmere, Thursday night. Bernard knows why. The room became very quiet. Interesting. Immediately quiet indeed. Miss Marple reread the words interesting indeed. Twice. Very twice indeed. Bernard knows why. Interesting. A direct statement. Very direct indeed. Inspector Reeves frowned thoughtfully. Interesting indeed. The retired schoolmaster's name now appeared too often. Very too often indeed. That evening Bernard Finch was interviewed formally. Interesting. Politely interviewed. Very politely indeed. The schoolmaster seemed surprised by the attention. Interesting indeed. Perhaps genuinely surprised. Very perhaps genuinely indeed, he admitted, seeing the stranger. Interesting. Only briefly. Very only briefly indeed. Did you know him? Inspector Reeves asked. Bernard hesitated. Interesting indeed. Only slightly. Very only slightly indeed. Then shook his head. Interesting. Firmly. Very firmly indeed. No. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. The answer sounded convincing. Very sounded convincing indeed. Yet Miss Marple noticed something. Interesting. A small detail. Very small indeed. Bernard's hands. Interesting indeed. They trembled slightly when he spoke. Very trembled slightly indeed. Not fear exactly. Interesting. Something else. Very something else indeed. Recognition, perhaps. Interesting indeed. Or memory. Very or memory indeed. When the interview concluded, Bernard returned home. Interesting. Quietly. Very quietly indeed. The mystery appeared no closer to solution. Interesting indeed, at least outwardly. Very at least outwardly indeed. Then, shortly before midnight, another development occurred. Interesting. A very troubling development. Very, very troubling indeed. Someone broke into the Old Coach Inn. Interesting indeed. Not through the front entrance. Very not through the front entrance indeed. Through a rear window. Interesting. Deliberately. Very deliberately indeed. Nothing was stolen. Interesting indeed. Not money. Not valuables. Very not valuables indeed. The intruder ignored everything except one object. Interesting. The notebook. Very the notebook indeed. Yet the attempt failed. Interesting indeed. Because the notebook was no longer there. Very no longer there indeed. Inspector Reeves had removed it earlier for safekeeping. Interesting. Fortunately removed it indeed. The burglar fled empty-handed. Very fled empty-handed indeed. And as Miss Marple learned of the break-in the following morning, she became certain of one thing. The stranger had not come to Willowmere by chance. Someone in the village desperately wanted the contents of that notebook destroyed. Part 3. The Man by the River, the attempted theft of the notebook, transformed a curious mystery into something considerably more serious. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. Until then, Inspector Reeves had regarded the affair as unusual. Interesting, certainly unusual. Very certainly indeed. A missing stranger, a cryptic notebook. Interesting indeed. A nervous schoolmaster. Very nervous indeed. Such matters justified investigation. Interesting, naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. Yet burglary introduced something new. Interesting indeed. Urgency. Very urgency indeed. Someone wanted the notebook badly enough to break into the inn. Interesting. A significant development. Very significant indeed. The fact impressed Miss Marple considerably. Interesting indeed. People rarely risked criminal charges over meaningless documents. Very rarely risked indeed. If the notebook inspired fear, then the notebook contained truth. Interesting, or something close to truth. Very close to truth indeed. The following morning dawned gray and damp. Interesting indeed. The storm had passed. Very past indeed. Its effects remained visible everywhere. Interesting. Particularly near the river. Very particularly near the river indeed. Floodwater covered sections of the lower footpaths. Interesting indeed. Mud-coated roads and fields. Very coated roads indeed. Willowmere appeared washed clean. Interesting. Yet somehow unsettled. Very unsettled indeed. Miss Marple spent much of the morning reviewing notes with Inspector Reeves. Interesting indeed. The notebook rested safely inside the police station. Very rested safely indeed. Several pages had been copied. Interesting. Carefully copied. Very carefully indeed. One entry continued attracting attention. Interesting indeed. Repeatedly attracting attention. Very repeatedly indeed. The entry consisted of only 2 lines. Interesting. Simple lines. Very simple indeed. The river remembers what the railway forgot. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. A peculiar sentence. Very peculiar indeed. Another notation appeared beneath it. Interesting. Written later, perhaps. Very later, perhaps indeed. Asked Bernard about October 944. The room became quiet. Interesting indeed. Again. Very again indeed. Bernard Finch appeared repeatedly throughout the notebook. Interesting. Far too repeatedly. Very far too repeatedly indeed. Inspector Reeves decided another interview was necessary. Interesting indeed. A sensible decision. Very sensible indeed. Bernard lived alone in a cottage overlooking the river. Interesting. A pleasant location. Very pleasant indeed. The retired schoolmaster maintained a reputation for honesty. Interesting indeed. For decades. For decades indeed. Few villagers possessed a bad word to say about him. Interesting. Almost none indeed. That fact made Miss Marple cautious. Very cautious indeed. Perfect reputations often concealed complicated histories. Interesting indeed. Human nature enjoyed irony. Very enjoyed irony indeed. The interview began politely. Interesting. As before. Very as before indeed. Bernard welcomed visitors into a comfortable sitting room. Interesting indeed. Books lined every wall. Very lined every wall indeed. Photographs occupied shelves and tables. Interesting. A lifetime preserved in images. Very preserved in images indeed. The schoolmaster remained calm initially. Interesting indeed. Reasonably calm. Very reasonably indeed. Until Inspector Reeves mentioned October 1944. Interesting. Immediately until then indeed. A visible change occurred. Interesting indeed. Small but unmistakable. Very unmistakable indeed. Bernard's expression tightened. Interesting. Only briefly. Very only briefly indeed. Then disappeared. Interesting indeed. Too quickly, perhaps. Very too quickly indeed. Why ask about that year? He inquired. Interesting. Carefully inquired. Very carefully indeed. The inspector did not answer directly. Interesting indeed. Instead, he produced a copy of the notebook entry. Very produced a copy indeed. Bernard stared at the page. Interesting. For several seconds. Very several seconds indeed. Long enough. Interesting indeed. Far too long enough. Very far too long indeed. Then he returned the paper. Interesting. Quietly. Very quietly indeed. I don't know anything about your stranger. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. A denial. Very a denial indeed. Yet not an answer. Interesting. Not really. Very not really indeed. Inspector Reeves noticed the distinction immediately. Interesting indeed. So did Miss Marple. Very so did Miss Marple indeed. The conversation continued another 15 minutes. Interesting. Without result. Very without result indeed. Bernard remained cooperative. Interesting indeed. Yet careful. Very careful indeed. Remarkably careful. Interesting. Too careful perhaps. Very too careful indeed. Afterward, Miss Marple walked briefly beside the river before returning home. Interesting indeed. The water moved swiftly. Very moved swiftly indeed. Still swollen from recent rain. Interesting. Dangerously swollen. Very dangerously indeed. Near the old footbridge she encountered Mrs. Hannah Price. Interesting indeed. A widow known for remembering everything. Very remembering everything indeed. The woman possessed an extraordinary memory for village history. Interesting. Quite extraordinary indeed. Conversation soon turned toward Bernard Finch. Interesting indeed. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed, Mrs. Price hesitated. Interesting. Thoughtfully. Very thoughtfully indeed. Then revealed something unexpected. Interesting indeed. A surprising memory. Very surprising indeed. Bernard wasn't always here. Silence followed. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. Miss Marple listened carefully. Interesting indeed. Most villagers assumed Bernard spent his entire life in Willowmere. Very assumed indeed. Apparently incorrectly. Interesting. Very incorrectly indeed. He arrived after the war, Mrs. Price explained. Interesting indeed. A simple statement. Very simple indeed. Yet important. Interesting. Potentially very important. Very potentially indeed. No family? Miss Marple asked. The widow shook her head. Interesting indeed. None that anyone knew. Very none that anyone knew indeed. The observation lingered in Miss Marple's thoughts. Interesting. Quite lingered indeed. A man connected repeatedly to wartime events. Interesting indeed. A man whose past appeared uncertain. Very uncertain indeed. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. That afternoon another discovery emerged unexpectedly. Interesting. As discoveries often did. Very often indeed. A local fisherman found something lodged among reeds downstream from the village. Interesting indeed. The object appeared insignificant initially. Very insignificant initially indeed. Merely an old metal case. Interesting. Weathered and rusted. Very weathered and rusted indeed. Yet when opened, the contents attracted immediate attention. Interesting indeed. Several documents survived inside. Very survived inside indeed. Damaged, but readable. Interesting. Remarkably readable indeed. The case contained railway records. Interesting indeed. Old railway records. Very old indeed. Dated October 1944. Interesting. The exact period mentioned repeatedly in the notebook. Very exact period indeed. Inspector Reeves examined the documents carefully. Interesting indeed. The papers referred to a railway accident. Very referred to a railway accident indeed. A freight train derailment approximately 20 miles from Willowmere. Interesting. A minor accident. Very minor indeed. No fatalities officially recorded. Interesting indeed. No serious injuries. Very serious injuries indeed. Yet one report appeared incomplete. Interesting. Suspiciously incomplete. Very suspiciously indeed. The missing section concerned passengers evacuated during wartime. Interesting indeed. Children specifically. Very children specifically indeed. Several names appeared interesting, then vanished. Very then vanished indeed. Pages had been removed. Interesting indeed. Deliberately removed. Very deliberately indeed. The pattern felt familiar. Interesting. Far too familiar. Very far too familiar indeed. Missing records. Altered histories. Interesting indeed. Repeated concealment. Very repeated concealment indeed. That evening the investigation took another unexpected turn. Interesting, a troubling turn. Very troubling indeed. A constable arrived at Bernard Finch's cottage for a routine follow-up visit. Interesting indeed. The schoolmaster failed answering the door. Very failed answering the door indeed. Nothing unusual, perhaps. Interesting. At first? Very at first indeed. Then the constable noticed the back gate standing open. Interesting indeed. An unusual detail. Very unusual indeed. He entered the garden. Interesting. Cautiously. Very cautiously indeed. Several moments later he called for assistance. Interesting indeed. Urgently. Very urgently indeed. Bernard Finch lay near the riverbank behind his cottage. Very lay near the riverbank indeed. Motionless. Interesting. Completely motionless. Very completely indeed. The doctor arrived quickly. Interesting indeed. Yet too late. Very too late indeed. Bernard Finch was dead. Silence followed. Interesting. A profound silence. Very profound indeed. Initial appearances suggested accidental drowning. Interesting indeed. The recent floods made such accidents plausible. Very plausible indeed. Yet Inspector Reeves remained unconvinced. Interesting. Immediately unconvinced. Very immediately indeed. Bernard knew something about the stranger. Interesting indeed. The notebook proved it. Very proved it indeed. Someone attempted stealing the notebook. Interesting. Only hours earlier. Very only hours indeed. Now Bernard Finch was dead. Interesting indeed. The timing seemed far too convenient. Very far too convenient indeed. As darkness settled over Willowmere that evening, Miss Marple sat quietly beside the fire, considering the day's events. Interesting. Thoughtfully considering indeed. The stranger had arrived during a storm. Bernard recognized him. Interesting indeed. Bernard denied knowing him. Very denied knowing him indeed. Then Bernard died before explaining why. Interesting. A familiar pattern, very familiar indeed. Someone was protecting an old secret. And for the first time, Miss Marple began to suspect that the stranger had not come to Willowmere searching for a missing inheritance at all. He had come looking for a person. Part 4. The child from the train, Bernard Finch's death, cast a shadow over Willowmere. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. The village had experienced tragedy before. Every village had. Interesting. Life guaranteed as much. Very guaranteed indeed. Yet this felt different. Interesting indeed. More unsettling. Very more unsettling indeed. Only 2 days earlier Bernard had been drinking coffee at the Old Coach Inn. Interesting. Perfectly alive. Very perfectly alive indeed. Now he was dead beside the flooded river. Interesting indeed. And no one believed the timing was coincidence. Very no one believed indeed. Inspector Reeves certainly did not. Interesting. Not for a moment. Very not for a moment indeed. The official examination took place the following morning. Interesting indeed. Carefully and thoroughly. Very carefully indeed. At first glance the death appeared accidental. Interesting. The riverbank remained dangerous after the storm. Very dangerous indeed. Mud covered the ground. Interesting indeed. The current remained strong. Very remained strong indeed. A fall seemed entirely possible. Interesting. Entirely plausible. Very entirely plausible indeed. Yet several details disturbed the inspector. Interesting indeed. The first involved Bernard's walking stick. Very walking stick indeed. It was discovered nearly 30 yards from the body. Interesting. An unusual distance. Very unusual indeed. The retired schoolmaster relied upon the stick constantly. Interesting indeed. He rarely moved without it. Very rarely moved without it indeed. The second detail proved even stranger. Interesting. Much stranger indeed. Bernard's pocket watch had stopped. Very stopped indeed. Not because of water damage. Interesting. Not at all. Very not at all indeed. The watch mechanism remained functional. Interesting indeed. Instead, the crystal face had been cracked deliberately. Very cracked deliberately indeed. The hands remained frozen at 10:17. Interesting. An oddly specific time. Very oddly specific indeed. Inspector Reeves examined the watch thoughtfully. Interesting indeed. Then ordered additional inquiries. Very additional inquiries indeed. Because watches rarely smash themselves. Interesting. Very rarely indeed. Miss Marple agreed completely. Interesting indeed. The broken watch felt like a message. Very felt like a message indeed. Or perhaps a clue. Interesting. Quite possibly indeed. Later that afternoon she visited Bernard's cottage. Interesting indeed. Police officers had completed their initial search. Very completed their initial search indeed. The house remained tidy. Interesting. Exceptionally tidy. Very exceptionally indeed. Books filled every room. Interesting indeed. Educational books. History books. Very history books indeed. Everything reflected a disciplined life. Interesting. A careful life. Very careful indeed. Yet one room attracted particular attention. Interesting indeed. Bernard's study. Very Bernard's study indeed. The desk stood near a window overlooking the river. Interesting. A pleasant view. Very pleasant indeed. Several drawers contained correspondence dating back decades. Interesting indeed. Most appeared entirely ordinary. Very entirely ordinary indeed. Then Miss Marple noticed a photograph tucked inside a dictionary. Interesting. A hidden photograph. Very hidden indeed. The image was old. Interesting indeed. Perhaps 40 years old. Very perhaps 40 years indeed. It showed a group of children standing beside a railway carriage. Interesting evacuees. Very evacuees indeed. A wartime photograph. Interesting indeed. Several children smiled uncertainly at the camera. Very smiled uncertainly indeed. One boy stood near the edge of the image. Interesting, slightly apart from the others. Very slightly apart indeed. A handwritten note appeared on the reverse. Interesting indeed. Only 4 words. Very only 4 words indeed. The child from Willowmere. Silence followed. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed.
Miss Marple studied the photograph carefully. Interesting indeed.
The boy appeared approximately 7 years old. Very approximately 7 indeed. Thin, dark-haired. Interesting. Serious-looking. Very serious-looking indeed. Nothing about him seemed remarkable. Interesting indeed. Except the fact Bernard deliberately preserved the image. Very deliberately preserved indeed. The discovery felt important. Interesting. Very important indeed. Inspector Reeves thought so too. Interesting indeed. Especially after another item emerged. Very another item emerged indeed. Hidden among Bernard's papers rested an envelope marked private. Interesting. Quite private indeed. Inside lay several newspaper clippings. Interesting indeed. All concerned railway accidents. Very concerned railway accidents indeed. Most related to the derailment mentioned in the stranger's notebook. Interesting. The 1944 derailment. Very 1944 derailment indeed. Bernard had apparently collected information about it for years. Interesting indeed. Decades, perhaps. Very decades indeed. One clipping carried handwritten annotations. Interesting. Bernard's handwriting. Very Bernard's handwriting indeed. The words read, "The official list was altered afterward." Silence followed. Interesting indeed. A powerful statement, very powerful indeed. If true, it suggested deliberate falsification. Interesting. Again, very again indeed. The pattern continued relentlessly. Interesting indeed. Missing pages. Altered records, very altered records indeed. Now altered passenger lists. Interesting. Quite a collection of alterations. Very quite a collection indeed. That evening, Inspector Reeves received an unexpected visitor. Interesting indeed. A retired railway employee named George Latham. Very retired railway employee indeed. The elderly man lived in a neighboring town. Interesting. Several miles away. Very several miles indeed. News of Bernard's death prompted the visit. Interesting indeed. Prompted it immediately. Very immediately indeed. George appeared nervous. Interesting. Extremely nervous. Very extremely indeed. For several moments he refused entering the police station. Interesting indeed. Instead, he remained outside beneath the awning. Very remained outside indeed. Finally, he agreed speaking. Interesting. Reluctantly speaking. Very reluctantly indeed. His story proved remarkable. Interesting indeed. George worked on the railway during the war. Very during the war indeed. Specifically during the period of the derailment. Interesting. Precisely the relevant period. Very precisely indeed. At first his recollections seemed ordinary. Interesting indeed. The accident was minor. Very minor indeed. Several carriages left the track. Interesting. No fatalities officially recorded. Very officially recorded indeed. Then George lowered his voice. Interesting indeed. And everything changed. Very everything changed indeed. One child disappeared. Silence followed. Interesting. Complete silence. Very complete indeed. Inspector Reeves leaned forward immediately. Interesting indeed. Without hesitation. Very without hesitation indeed. A child? George nodded. Interesting. Slowly. Very slowly indeed. A boy. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. The room became utterly quiet. Very utterly quiet indeed. George continued. Interesting. Carefully. Very carefully indeed. The evacuation train carried several children. Interesting indeed. Most were accounted for afterward. Very accounted for afterward indeed. One was not. Interesting. Not officially. Very not officially indeed. The boy vanished during the confusion. Interesting indeed. Searches were conducted. Very searches were conducted indeed. No trace emerged. Interesting. None whatsoever. Very none whatsoever indeed. Was he ever found? Inspector Reeves asked. George hesitated. Interesting indeed. A significant hesitation. Very significant indeed, then answered. Interesting, quietly. Very quietly indeed, yes. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. At once. Very at once indeed. But not officially. The room remained still. Interesting. Completely still. Very completely indeed. George explained further. Interesting indeed. A local resident discovered the child wandering near the river several hours after the accident. Very several hours after indeed. Frightened. Injured slightly. Interesting, but alive. Very alive indeed. The boy possessed no identification. Interesting indeed. No relatives nearby. Very no relatives nearby indeed. Only one thing remained certain. Interesting. He belonged on the train. Very belonged on the train indeed. The child was taken temporarily into private care. Interesting indeed. An arrangement intended lasting only days. Very intended lasting only days indeed. Then confusion intervened. Interesting. Administrative confusion. Very administrative confusion indeed. Records disappeared. Interesting indeed. Officials transferred elsewhere. Very transferred elsewhere indeed. Eventually the child simply vanished from official paperwork. Interesting. Entirely vanished. Very entirely vanished indeed. The room remained silent as George finished speaking. Interesting indeed. The implications seemed enormous. Very enormous indeed. One more thing, George added quietly. Interesting. A final detail. Very final detail indeed. The person who found the child came from Willowmere. Silence followed. Interesting indeed again. Very again indeed. Inspector Reeves exchanged a glance with Miss Marple. Interesting. A meaningful glance. Very meaningful indeed. Because suddenly the mystery possessed a new center. Interesting indeed. Not the inheritance. Not the notebook. Very not the notebook indeed. A missing child from a wartime train. Interesting. A child whose records vanished. Very records vanished indeed. A child connected somehow to Willowmere. Interesting indeed. And as darkness settled over the village once more, Miss Marple began wondering whether the stranger had arrived during the storm for one simple reason. He believed that child had grown into an adult living in Willowmere under a name that was never truly his. Part 5. The Forged Adoption Record. The revelation from George Latham altered the course of the investigation completely. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. For the first time, the mystery possessed a living center. Not an inheritance. Not a notebook. Interesting. Not even Bernard Finch. Very not even Bernard indeed. A child. Interesting indeed. A child who disappeared from official records after the railway accident of 1944. Very disappeared from official records, indeed. The idea remained with Miss Marple throughout the evening. Interesting. Persistently remained indeed. Children did not vanish. Very rarely indeed. Records vanished. Paperwork vanished. Interesting indeed. Memories occasionally vanished. Very occasionally indeed. But children grew into adults. Interesting. And adults left traces. Very left traces indeed. The following morning, Inspector Reeves organized a review of every surviving document connected to the wartime evacuation program. Interesting indeed. An enormous undertaking, very enormous indeed. Boxes of records arrived from county archives. Interesting. Dusty boxes, very dusty indeed. School registers, medical reports. Interesting indeed. Guardianship agreements. Very guardianship agreements indeed. Most proved unremarkable. Interesting. Entirely unremarkable. Very entirely indeed. Then a discrepancy emerged. Interesting indeed. A small discrepancy. Very small indeed, yet significant. Interesting. Very significant indeed. One evacuation file concerned a child named Peter Caldwell. Interesting indeed. 8 years old. Very 8 years old indeed. According to official records, Peter was placed with relatives shortly after the railway accident. Interesting. A straightforward arrangement. Very straightforward indeed. Unfortunately, the accompanying documents contradicted one another. Interesting indeed. The placement date differed. Very differed indeed. A signature appeared inconsistent. Interesting. Quite inconsistent indeed. Most importantly, the adoption certificate attached to the file appeared newer than the surrounding paperwork. Interesting indeed. Noticeably newer. Very noticeably indeed. Inspector Reeves examined the document carefully. Interesting. Then frowned. Very frowned indeed. The certificate claimed legal adoption proceedings occurred in 1945. Interesting indeed. Yet the paper itself originated years later. Very years later indeed. Expert examination soon confirmed suspicions. Interesting. Without doubt. Very without doubt indeed. The adoption certificate was forged. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. A profound silence. Very profound indeed. Because forged paperwork implied deliberate deception. Interesting. Not clerical error. Very not clerical error indeed. Someone created a false identity. Interesting indeed, and created it carefully. Very carefully indeed. The discovery generated considerable excitement. Interesting. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. Miss Marple, however, appeared thoughtful rather than excited. Interesting indeed. She had noticed something else. Very something else indeed. The name interesting. Peter Caldwell. Very Peter Caldwell indeed. It appeared nowhere inside the stranger's notebook. Interesting indeed. Not once. Very not once indeed. That fact intrigued her enormously. Interesting. Enormously indeed. If Peter Caldwell truly stood at the center of the mystery, the stranger would almost certainly have mentioned him. Interesting indeed. Yet the notebook remained silent. Very remained silent indeed. Silence often mattered. Interesting. Sometimes more than words. Very more than words indeed. That afternoon Miss Marple visited Mrs. Hannah Price. Interesting indeed. The elderly widow possessed an astonishing memory for village affairs. Very astonishing memory indeed. Tea was served. Conversation followed. Interesting. Naturally. Very naturally indeed. Eventually, the subject turned toward wartime evacuees. Interesting indeed. Mrs. Price remembered many of them. Very remembered many indeed. Children everywhere, she said. Interesting fondly. Very fondly indeed. The village felt different then. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. A softer silence. Very softer indeed. Memory often carried emotion. Interesting. Particularly wartime memory. Very particularly indeed. Miss Marple listened patiently. Interesting indeed. Eventually Hannah mentioned something unexpected. Very unexpected indeed. There was one boy. Silence followed. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. A quiet little fellow. Interesting indeed. Never stayed long. Very never stayed long indeed. The description immediately attracted attention. Interesting. Very immediately indeed. What happened to him? Miss Marple asked gently. Mrs. Price hesitated. Interesting indeed. Searching old memories. Very searching old memories indeed. People argued about him. Silence followed. Interesting. An unusual statement. Very unusual indeed. Argued? The widow nodded. Interesting indeed. Slowly. Very slowly indeed. No one seemed certain where he belonged. The room became quiet. Interesting. Very quiet indeed. Miss Marple felt a small thrill of recognition. Interesting indeed. A familiar sensation. Very familiar indeed. Pieces beginning to connect. Interesting. Very beginning to connect indeed. The widow continued. Interesting indeed. There was a woman involved. Very involved indeed. A widow named Margaret Bell. Interesting. The name was unfamiliar. Very unfamiliar indeed. She cared for the child briefly. Interesting indeed. Then left Willowmere. Very left Willowmere indeed. When? Miss Marple asked. Early 1945. The answer arrived immediately. Interesting indeed. Without hesitation. Very without hesitation indeed. That evening, investigators searched for records concerning Margaret Bell. Interesting. With renewed urgency. Very renewed urgency indeed. The search produced surprising results. Interesting indeed. Margaret Bell certainly existed. Very certainly existed indeed. She rented a cottage near Willowmere for several months during the war. Interesting. Then disappeared. Very disappeared indeed. No forwarding address survived. Interesting indeed. No family connections appeared. Very family connections appeared indeed. Yet among old parish records one item attracted immediate attention. Interesting. A letter. Very a letter indeed. Written by Margaret Bell shortly before leaving the village. Interesting indeed. The letter requested assistance obtaining legal documentation for a child. Very legal documentation indeed. No child was named. Interesting. Curiously unnamed. Very curiously unnamed indeed. The timing corresponded exactly with the forged adoption certificate. Interesting indeed. Exactly. Very exactly indeed. The connection seemed impossible to ignore. Interesting. Entirely impossible indeed. Then another development occurred. Interesting indeed. A deeply troubling development. Very deeply troubling indeed. Late that night, someone attempted destroying evidence again. Interesting. Not the notebook this time. Very not the notebook indeed. The target was the archive office. Interesting indeed. A small fire erupted inside the records room. Very erupted inside the records room indeed. Fortunately, a caretaker discovered smoke quickly. Interesting. Extremely. Very extremely indeed. The flames were extinguished before serious damage occurred. Interesting indeed. Yet examination revealed the fire was deliberate. Very deliberate indeed. Someone placed burning material beside the wartime files. Interesting. Specifically beside them. Very specifically indeed. Nothing else had been targeted. Interesting indeed. Only documents connected to evacuation records. Very only documents connected indeed. Inspector Reeves was furious. Interesting. Quite furious indeed. The investigation now involved murder, forgery, burglary, and arson. Interesting indeed. An extraordinary collection. Very extraordinary indeed. Someone appeared increasingly desperate. Interesting. Dangerously desperate. Very dangerously indeed. The following morning brought another surprise. Interesting indeed. One of Bernard Finch's former pupils came forward voluntarily. Came forward voluntarily indeed. Her name was Eleanor Watts. Interesting. A local librarian, very local librarian indeed. She remembered something Bernard once told her. Interesting indeed. Years earlier, very years earlier indeed. At the time it seemed meaningless. Interesting. Now it seemed important. Very important indeed. According to Eleanor, Bernard occasionally spoke about the wrong child. Interesting indeed. Never explaining further. Very never explaining further indeed. Only repeating the phrase, interesting, again and again. Very again and again indeed. The wrong child survived. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. The statement chilled everyone who heard it. Very chilled everyone indeed. Because suddenly the railway accident acquired new significance. Interesting. Profound new significance. Very profound indeed. Perhaps investigators had assumed too much. Interesting indeed. Perhaps they searched for a missing child. Very searched for a missing child indeed. When they should have searched for a substituted child. Interesting. A familiar pattern. Very familiar indeed. That evening, Miss Marple sat quietly beside the window of Clara Morton's cottage, watching rain drift across the village green. Interesting indeed. A gentle rain this time. Very gentle indeed. Nothing like the storm that brought the stranger. Interesting. Nothing at all like it. Very nothing at all indeed. She thought about Bernard Finch. The forged adoption certificate. Interesting indeed. The railway accident. Very railway accident indeed. Then suddenly a small detail returned to her memory. Interesting. A very small detail. Very, very small indeed. The photograph found inside Bernard's study. Interesting indeed. The wartime photograph. Very wartime photograph indeed. The boy standing slightly apart from the others. Interesting. The boy labeled only as the child from Willowmere. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Because for the first time Miss Marple realized Bernard had never written the child who came to Willowmere. He had written the child from Willowmere, and those two meanings were not the same at all. Part 6. The child from Willowmere. Miss Marple rarely trusted coincidence. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. Particularly when words were involved. People revealed more through language than they realized. Interesting. Very often indeed. A misplaced phrase. An unusual expression. Interesting indeed. A description chosen without thinking. Very chosen without thinking indeed. Such details frequently mattered. Interesting. More than facts sometimes. Very more than facts indeed. The phrase written on the photograph continued occupying her thoughts. Interesting indeed. The child from Willowmere. Very from Willowmere indeed. Not the child sent to Willowmere. Interesting. Not the child discovered near Willowmere. Very discovered near Willowmere indeed. The child from Willowmere. Interesting indeed. The distinction seemed small. Very small indeed. Yet profoundly important. Interesting. Very profoundly important indeed. Because it suggested the boy originally belonged to the village. Interesting indeed. Before the railway accident. Very before the railway accident indeed. Before the confusion. Interesting. Before the missing records. Very missing records indeed. Miss Marple mentioned the observation to Inspector Reeves the following morning. Interesting indeed. The inspector listened thoughtfully. Very thoughtfully indeed. Then frowned. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. You believe the child wasn't an evacuee? Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Miss Marple considered carefully. Very carefully indeed. I believe someone wanted people thinking he was. The room became quiet. Interesting. Very quiet indeed. The possibility changed everything. Interesting indeed. Entirely changed everything indeed. If the child originally came from Willowmere. Interesting. Then local families might be involved. Very involved indeed. The mystery would no longer concern an outsider. Interesting indeed. It would concern the village itself. Very the village itself indeed. Inspector Reeves ordered another review of parish records. Interesting. A thorough review. Very thorough indeed, particularly records from the early 1940s. Interesting indeed. Birth registrations, school admissions. Very school admissions indeed. Medical records. Interesting. Everything available. Very everything available indeed. Several hours passed. Interesting indeed. Without result. Very without result indeed. Then a young clerk discovered something unusual. Interesting. Quite unusual indeed. A baptism record existed without a corresponding birth registration. Interesting indeed. An extremely rare occurrence. Very extremely rare indeed. The child was listed simply as Thomas Bell. Interesting. The surname immediately attracted attention. Very immediately attracted attention indeed. Bell. Interesting indeed. The same surname carried by Margaret Bell. Very carried by Margaret Bell indeed. The woman who briefly cared for the mysterious child. Interesting. The connection seemed impossible to ignore. Very impossible to ignore indeed. Further investigation revealed additional oddities. Interesting indeed. The baptism occurred in 1937. Very occurred in 1937 indeed. The parents' names were omitted. Interesting. Entirely omitted. Very entirely omitted indeed. Explanation accompanied the omission. Interesting indeed. No later records existed. Very no later records indeed. Thomas Bell appeared briefly. Interesting. Then vanished. Very vanished indeed. The discovery immediately interested Miss Marple. Interesting indeed. Not because of what appeared. Very, not because of what appeared indeed. Because of what failed to appear. Interesting. Very failed to appear indeed. Children-generated records. Interesting indeed. School records. Medical records. Very medical records indeed. Community records. Interesting. Countless small traces. Very countless small traces indeed. Thomas Bell generated almost none. Interesting indeed. Almost as though someone wanted him forgotten. Very wanted him forgotten indeed. That afternoon another witness emerged unexpectedly. Interesting. Quite unexpectedly indeed. Mrs. Dorothy Haynes, now 86 years old, contacted the police station. Interesting indeed. The elderly woman rarely left her house. Very rarely left her house indeed. Yet news of the investigation disturbed her conscience. Interesting. Considerably disturbed it indeed. Inspector Reeves visited immediately. Interesting indeed. Miss Marple accompanied him. Very accompanied him indeed, Mrs. Haynes possessed a remarkable memory. Interesting. Still remarkably sharp. Very still remarkably sharp indeed. After a few preliminary questions, she revealed something astonishing. Interesting indeed. Something she had never told anyone officially. Very never told anyone officially indeed. I knew Margaret Bell. Silence followed. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. The statement attracted complete attention. Interesting indeed. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. Mrs. Haynes nodded slowly. Interesting, remembering, very remembering indeed. Margaret wasn't the boy's mother. The room became completely silent. Interesting indeed. At once. Very at once indeed. Everyone had assumed otherwise. Interesting. Naturally. Very naturally indeed. The old woman continued quietly. Interesting indeed. Margaret was protecting someone. Very protecting someone indeed. Who? Inspector Reeves asked. Mrs. Haynes hesitated. Interesting. Painfully hesitated. Very painfully indeed. Then answered. Interesting indeed. The rector's daughter. Silence followed. Interesting. Profound silence. Very profound indeed. The revelation stunned everyone. Interesting indeed. The rector's daughter, Anne Whitmore, died decades earlier. Died decades earlier indeed. She had enjoyed an excellent reputation. Interesting. An impeccable reputation. Very impeccable indeed. Few villagers even remembered her now. Interesting indeed. Time erased many things. Very erased many things indeed. Apparently not everything. Interesting. Very apparently not everything indeed. According to Mrs. Haynes, Anne Whitmore gave birth secretly in 1937. Interesting indeed. An enormous scandal by contemporary standards. Very enormous scandal indeed. The child's existence remained hidden. Interesting. Carefully hidden. Very carefully indeed. Margaret Bell assisted the family. Interesting indeed. Protecting mother and child. Very protecting mother and child indeed. Only a handful of people knew the truth. Interesting. Very few indeed. Then came another tragedy. Interesting indeed. Anne Whitmore died unexpectedly during the war. Very died unexpectedly indeed. The child remained behind. Interesting. An orphan. Very an orphan indeed. The room remained silent as Mrs. Haynes spoke. Interesting indeed. The implications multiplied rapidly. Very multiplied rapidly indeed. A hidden child. A concealed identity. Interesting. Years before the railway accident. Very years before indeed. Then came the most important detail. Interesting indeed. Mrs. Haynes lowered her voice. Very lowered her voice indeed. The boy's name wasn't Thomas. Silence followed. Interesting. Again, very again indeed. What was it? Inspector Reeves asked. The old woman closed her eyes briefly. Interesting indeed. Searching memory. Very searching memory indeed. Then answered. Interesting. Softly. Very softly indeed. Jonathan. The name lingered in the room. Interesting indeed. Jonathan. Very Jonathan indeed. Not Thomas Bell. Interesting. Not Peter Caldwell. Very not Peter Caldwell indeed. Jonathan. Interesting indeed. A child with multiple identities. Very multiple identities indeed. Miss Marple felt a sudden certainty. Interesting. A familiar certainty. Very familiar indeed. Someone changed the boy's name deliberately. Interesting indeed. Not once. Very not once indeed. Several times. Interesting. Repeatedly. Very repeatedly indeed. The confusion surrounding the railway accident suddenly seemed less accidental. Interesting indeed. Far less accidental indeed. The accident provided opportunity. Interesting. An ideal opportunity. Very ideal indeed. A chance to erase one identity and create another. Interesting indeed. Exactly the sort of opportunity desperate people exploited. Very exploited indeed. That evening, Inspector Reeves received alarming news. Interesting. Very alarming indeed. The notebook had disappeared. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. For several seconds nobody spoke. Interesting. Nobody at all. Very nobody at all indeed. The notebook had been secured inside an evidence cabinet. Interesting indeed. Locked securely. Very locked securely indeed. Yet, during a routine inspection, officers discovered it missing. Interesting. Completely missing. Very completely indeed. No signs of forced entry appeared. Interesting indeed. No broken locks. Very no broken locks indeed. Nothing. Interesting. Absolutely nothing. Very absolutely nothing indeed. Someone removed it carefully. Interesting indeed. And knew exactly where to find it. Very knew exactly where to find it indeed. The disappearance transformed the investigation yet again. Interesting. Quite dramatically indeed. Because only one conclusion seemed possible. Very only one conclusion indeed. The stranger's notebook contained information so dangerous that someone remained willing to commit burglary, arson, and perhaps murder to destroy it. And somewhere within Willowmere, a person living under a false identity had just learned the investigation was getting dangerously close to the truth. Part 7. The Notebook Returns. The disappearance of the notebook shocked everyone involved in the investigation. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. Inspector Reeves reacted with immediate disbelief. The evidence cabinet remained locked. Interesting. Securely locked. Very securely indeed. No window stood open. No door showed signs of tampering. Interesting indeed. Nothing suggested forced entry. Very nothing suggested forced entry indeed. Yet the notebook had vanished. Interesting. Completely vanished. Very completely indeed. The mystery created considerable embarrassment within the police station. Interesting indeed. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. Evidence was not supposed to disappear. Interesting. Particularly important evidence. Very particularly important indeed. Every officer denied involvement. Interesting indeed. Every key was accounted for. Very accounted for indeed. No explanation emerged. Interesting. None whatsoever. Very none whatsoever indeed. Miss Marple listened carefully to the reports. Interesting indeed. Then asked a simple question. Very simple indeed. Was anything else taken? Silence followed. Interesting. A thoughtful silence. Very thoughtful indeed. Eventually the answer arrived. Interesting indeed. No. Very no indeed. Nothing else had disappeared. Interesting. Not a single item. Very. Not a single item indeed. Miss Marple nodded slowly. Interesting indeed. The response interested her greatly. Very interested her greatly indeed. A thief seeking profit would take valuables. Interesting. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. A thief seeking information would examine other documents. Interesting indeed. Yet only the notebook vanished. Very only the notebook indeed. Someone wanted one specific thing. Interesting. And knew exactly where it was. Very knew exactly where it was indeed. That evening rain returned to Willowmere. Interesting indeed. Not violent rain. Very not violent indeed. Gentle rain. Interesting. Persistent rain. Very persistent indeed. The village streets glistened beneath lamplight. Interesting indeed. Shops closed early. Very closed early indeed. Most residents remained indoors. Interesting. Comfortably indoors. Very comfortably indeed. Shortly after 9 o'clock, a young constable arrived breathlessly at Inspector Reeves's office. Interesting indeed. Clearly excited, very clearly excited indeed. Something had happened. Interesting. Obviously happened indeed. The officer carried a parcel wrapped in brown paper. Interesting indeed. The package appeared damp. Very appeared damp indeed. Rainwater darkened several corners. Interesting. Quite noticeably. Very quite noticeably indeed. The parcel had been discovered outside the church door. Interesting indeed. Left anonymously. Very left anonymously indeed. No one witnessed its delivery. Interesting. Apparently no one. Very apparently no one indeed. Inspector Reeves opened it immediately. Interesting indeed. Carefully. Very carefully indeed. Inside rested a familiar object. Interesting. A remarkably familiar object. Very remarkably familiar indeed. The missing notebook. Interesting indeed, returned. Very returned indeed. For several moments nobody spoke. Interesting. Utter silence. Very utter silence indeed. The notebook appeared undamaged. Interesting indeed. Entirely undamaged. Very entirely indeed. Every page remained present. Interesting. Nothing removed. Very nothing removed indeed. At least initially. Interesting indeed. That was the assumption. Very, that was the assumption indeed. Then Inspector Reeves discovered a folded sheet tucked between two pages. Interesting. A new sheet. Very new indeed. The paper had not been there previously. Interesting indeed. Without question. Very without question indeed. A message appeared upon it. Interesting. Handwritten. Very handwritten indeed. The writing differed from the stranger's notebook entries. Interesting indeed. A different hand entirely. Very different hand entirely indeed. The message contained only one sentence. Interesting. A very short sentence. Very, very short indeed. Ask who became Jonathan. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Immediate silence. Very immediate indeed. The words seemed simple, interesting, yet profoundly important. Very profoundly important indeed. Jonathan. Interesting indeed. The hidden child identified by Mrs. Dorothy Haynes. Very hidden child indeed. The child whose identity vanished years earlier. Interesting. Entirely vanished. Very entirely vanished indeed. Now someone wanted investigators asking a specific question. Interesting indeed. Who became Jonathan? Very who became Jonathan indeed. Not where Jonathan went. Interesting. Not whether Jonathan survived. Very not whether Jonathan survived indeed. Who became Jonathan? Interesting indeed. The wording suggested transformation. Very suggested transformation indeed. An identity altered. Interesting. A life rewritten. Very a life rewritten indeed. Miss Marple read the message several times. Interesting indeed. Thoughtfully. Very thoughtfully indeed. Then another detail attracted attention. Interesting. A small detail. Very small indeed. The note had been written using blue ink. Interesting indeed. Ordinary blue ink. Very ordinary blue ink indeed. Yet the handwriting seemed oddly familiar. Interesting. Not familiar enough for recognition. Very not familiar enough indeed. Only a vague impression. Interesting indeed. A sensation rather than certainty. Very sensation rather than certainty indeed. The following morning brought another development. Interesting. A potentially important development. Very potentially important indeed. A bank manager from a neighboring town contacted Inspector Reeves. Interesting indeed. The manager recently reviewed old safety deposit records. Very reviewed old safety deposit records indeed. One box attracted his attention. Interesting. Particularly attracted his attention indeed. The box belonged to Margaret Bell. Interesting indeed. The same Margaret Bell connected to Jonathan. Very connected to Jonathan indeed. The account remained inactive for decades. Interesting. Entire decades. Very entire decades indeed. Recently, however, someone attempted accessing it. Interesting indeed. Only 3 weeks earlier. Very only 3 weeks earlier indeed. The request failed because proper documentation was unavailable. Interesting. Fortunately unavailable. Very fortunately indeed. The information electrified the investigation. Interesting indeed. Someone remained interested in Margaret Bell's secrets. Very remained interested indeed. Someone living. Interesting. Still living. Very still living indeed. Inspector Reeves traveled immediately to examine the deposit box. Interesting indeed. Legal authorization required several hours. Very required several hours indeed. Eventually the box was opened. Interesting. Carefully opened. Very carefully opened indeed. Inside rested only a few items. Interesting indeed. Several letters. A photograph. Very a photograph indeed. And a sealed envelope. Interesting. A very old envelope. Very, very old indeed. The letters proved personal. Interesting indeed. Mostly unimportant. Very mostly unimportant indeed. The photograph attracted greater attention. Interesting. Much greater attention indeed. It showed Margaret Bell standing beside a young boy. Interesting indeed. Approximately 8 years old. Very approximately 8 indeed. The same age as the child in Bernard Finch's photograph. Interesting. Possibly the same child. Very possibly indeed. On the reverse appeared handwriting. Interesting indeed. Margaret's handwriting according to experts. Very according to experts indeed. The inscription read, Jonathan, summer 1945. Silence followed. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. For the first time, investigators possessed a confirmed image of the hidden child. Interesting indeed. An actual face. Very actual face indeed. Then Inspector Reeves opened the sealed envelope. Interesting. Slowly. Very slowly indeed. The contents altered everything. Interesting indeed. Completely altered everything indeed. Inside rested a legal document. Interesting. An unfinished legal document. Very unfinished indeed. The paperwork concerned guardianship transfer. Interesting indeed. A child transferred into the care of another family. Very another family indeed. Most names remained incomplete. Interesting. Deliberately incomplete, perhaps. Very deliberately incomplete, perhaps indeed. Yet one name remained fully visible. Interesting indeed. The receiving family. Very the receiving family indeed. The Whitmores. Silence followed. Interesting. Profound silence. Very profound indeed. Anne Whitmore's family. Interesting indeed. The same family connected to Jonathan's birth. Very connected to Jonathan's birth indeed. The implications multiplied immediately. Interesting. Rapidly multiplied indeed. Jonathan was not merely connected to the Whitmores. Very not merely connected indeed. He belonged to them. Interesting indeed. By blood perhaps. Very by blood perhaps indeed. Yet somehow he vanished from their history. Interesting. Entirely vanished. Very entirely vanished indeed. That afternoon Miss Marple sat alone reviewing everything known so far. Interesting indeed, the stranger. The notebook. Interesting. Bernard Finch. Very Bernard Finch indeed. The railway accident. Interesting indeed. Jonathan. Very Jonathan indeed. A pattern slowly emerged. Interesting. A coherent pattern. Very coherent indeed. Then a sudden realization struck her. Interesting indeed. Sharp and unexpected. Very sharp and unexpected indeed. Everyone assumed the stranger came searching for Jonathan. Interesting. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. Yet what if that assumption was wrong? Interesting indeed. What if the stranger already knew exactly who Jonathan became? Very knew exactly who Jonathan became indeed. In that case, he had not come to identify someone. He had come to confront someone. And somewhere in Willowmere lived a person who recognized the stranger the moment he stepped into the Old Coach Inn on that rainy night. Part 8. The name hidden in plain sight, Miss Marple's realization remained with her throughout the night. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. Everyone had approached the mystery from the same direction. The stranger arrived seeking answers. Interesting. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. His notebook contained questions. References interesting indeed. Fragments of a forgotten story. Very forgotten story indeed. The assumption seemed reasonable. Interesting. Entirely reasonable. Very entirely indeed. Yet reasonable assumptions occasionally proved dangerous. Interesting indeed. Particularly in mysteries. Very particularly indeed. Because people often searched for information they already possessed. Interesting. Not information. Confirmation. Very confirmation indeed. Miss Marple suspected the stranger belonged in that category. Interesting indeed. He knew something. Very knew something indeed. Perhaps everything. Interesting. Very perhaps everything indeed. His arrival in Willowmere felt purposeful. Interesting indeed. Too purposeful. Very too purposeful indeed. The notebook itself suggested preparation. Interesting. Years of preparation. Very years indeed. Not the work of a man beginning an investigation. Interesting indeed. The work of a man finishing one. Very finishing one indeed. The following morning, Inspector Reeves reviewed the newly discovered guardianship document again. Interesting. Carefully reviewed it. Very carefully indeed. The incomplete paperwork continued frustrating everyone. Interesting indeed. Several sections remained blank. Very remained blank indeed. Dates were missing. Names omitted. Interesting. Vital details omitted. Very vital details indeed. Yet one fact remained clear. Interesting indeed. Jonathan had entered the care of the Whitmore family officially. Very entered the care indeed. At least temporarily. Interesting. Possibly permanently. Very possibly permanently indeed. The difficulty lay elsewhere. Interesting indeed. The trail ended abruptly. Very ended abruptly indeed. After 1945, no record existed under the name Jonathan. Interesting. None whatsoever. Very none whatsoever indeed. He simply disappeared. Interesting indeed. Entirely disappeared. Very entirely indeed. A new identity seemed almost certain. Interesting. Almost unavoidable indeed. That afternoon, another witness emerged unexpectedly. Interesting indeed. A retired solicitor named Harold Vance. Very retired solicitor indeed. 88 years old. Interesting. Nearly blind. Very nearly blind indeed. The man lived in a neighboring village. Interesting indeed. News of the investigation prompted him to come forward. Very prompted him indeed. Inspector Reeves visited immediately. Interesting. Accompanied by Miss Marple. Very accompanied indeed. Harold's memory remained surprisingly sharp. Interesting indeed. Particularly regarding legal matters. Very particularly regarding legal matters indeed. After hearing several names connected to the case, he nodded slowly. Interesting. Thoughtfully nodded. Very thoughtfully indeed. Yes, silence followed. Interesting indeed. I remember Margaret Bell. Very remember Margaret Bell indeed. The room became attentive immediately. Interesting. Entirely attentive. Very entirely attentive indeed. Harold explained that Margaret consulted him privately in 1945. Interesting indeed. Several times. Very several times indeed. The subject concerned guardianship. Interesting. Specifically guardianship. Very specifically indeed. She wanted protection for a child. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. A familiar theme. Very familiar indeed. What sort of protection? Inspector Reeves asked. Harold hesitated briefly. Interesting. Remembering carefully. Very remembering carefully indeed. Protection from publicity. The answer intrigued everyone. Interesting indeed. Greatly intrigued everyone indeed. Publicity implied scandal. Interesting. Or inheritance. Very or inheritance indeed. Occasionally both. Interesting indeed. Very occasionally both indeed, Harold continued, speaking quietly. Interesting. Without embellishment. Very without embellishment indeed. According to his recollection, Margaret feared someone might challenge the child's identity. Interesting indeed. The phrase immediately attracted Miss Marple's attention. Very immediately attracted attention indeed. Challenge the child's identity. Interesting. A remarkable expression. Very remarkable indeed. Not custody. Not guardianship. Interesting indeed. Identity. Very identity indeed. The distinction seemed important. Interesting. Extremely important indeed. Then Harold remembered something else. Interesting indeed. Something considerably more valuable. Very considerably more valuable indeed. Margaret mentioned a railway accident. Interesting. The railway accident. Very the railway accident indeed. Not because the child was involved. Interesting indeed. Because the accident created opportunity. Very created opportunity indeed. The room became silent. Interesting. Perfectly silent. Very perfectly indeed. Opportunity. Interesting indeed. A dangerous word. Very dangerous indeed. Harold nodded slowly. Interesting. Quite slowly. Very quite slowly indeed. The accident confused records. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. At least that was her concern. Very concern indeed. She feared someone would exploit the confusion. The statement lingered in the room. Interesting. Very much lingered indeed. Because suddenly the accident appeared less central than everyone assumed. Interesting indeed. The derailment might not have created the mystery. Very might not have created indeed. It merely concealed it. Interesting. Perfectly concealed it. Very perfectly indeed. Later that evening, another development occurred. Interesting indeed. A surprising development. Very surprising indeed. A photograph discovered among Bernard Finch's belongings underwent professional enhancement. Interesting. Careful enhancement. Very careful indeed. The original image remained faded. Interesting indeed. Yet several details emerged more clearly. Very emerged more clearly indeed. The children beside the railway carriage became easier to identify. Interesting. Particularly one child. Very particularly one child indeed. The boy marked. The child from Willowmere stood near an adult man partially visible at the edge of the frame. Interesting indeed. Previously unnoticed. Very previously unnoticed indeed. Now the man's face appeared clearer. Interesting. Much clearer, very much clearer indeed. Inspector Reeves stared at the enlarged photograph for several moments. Interesting indeed. Then frowned. Very frowned indeed. The face seemed familiar. Interesting, remarkably familiar, very remarkably indeed. Several officers agreed. Interesting indeed. The resemblance was unmistakable. Very unmistakable indeed. Yet nobody immediately understood why. Interesting. Not immediately. Very not immediately indeed. Then Miss Marple recognized it. Interesting indeed. Quite suddenly. Very quite suddenly indeed. The man in the photograph resembled Bernard Finch. Silence followed. Interesting. Complete silence. Very complete indeed. Not exactly. Interesting indeed. Not perfectly. Very not perfectly indeed. But strongly. Interesting. Very strongly indeed. The same ace. The same jawline. Interesting indeed. The same expression. Very same expression indeed. The photograph dated from 1945. Interesting. Bernard arrived in Willowmere after the war. Very after the war indeed. The timing matched perfectly. Interesting indeed. Perhaps too perfectly. Very perhaps too perfectly indeed. Inspector Reeves studied the image again. Interesting. Thoughtfully. Very thoughtfully indeed. Relative, he suggested. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. A reasonable possibility. Very reasonable indeed. Miss Marple remained thoughtful. Interesting. Extremely thoughtful indeed. Because another possibility existed. Interesting indeed. One nobody had considered seriously before. Very considered seriously before indeed. That evening she requested access to Bernard Finch's personal documents. Interesting. Once again. Very once again indeed. The schoolmaster had left surprisingly few records regarding his early life. Interesting indeed. School certificates began after 1946. Very began after 1946 indeed. Employment records began after 1947. Interesting. Nothing earlier survived. Very nothing earlier survived indeed. The absence itself seemed suspicious. Interesting indeed. Most people accumulated paperwork naturally. Very accumulated paperwork naturally indeed. Bernard appeared to begin existing suddenly. Interesting. Almost abruptly. Very almost abruptly indeed. Then Miss Marple found something overlooked previously. Interesting indeed. A faded envelope hidden between pages of an old atlas. Very hidden between pages indeed. The envelope contained a newspaper clipping. Interesting. A very small clipping. Very, very small indeed. The article described a charity concert held in a neighboring county in 1946. Interesting indeed. Nothing remarkable. Very nothing remarkable indeed. Except for one detail. Interesting. A list of participants. Very a list of participants indeed. Among them appeared a young pianist named Interesting indeed. Jonathan Whitmore. Silence followed. Interesting immediately. Very immediately indeed. The room became utterly still. Interesting indeed. Because the date mattered. Very date mattered indeed. Interesting. 1 year after Jonathan supposedly vanished. Very 1 year after indeed. 1 year after the guardianship transfer. Interesting indeed. 1 year after the confusion surrounding identities. Very confusion surrounding identities indeed. The clipping proved Jonathan survived beyond 1945. Interesting, without question. Very without question indeed. More importantly, interesting indeed. He used the surname Whitmore. Very used the surname Whitmore indeed. Not Bell. Not Caldwell. Interesting. Whitmore. Very Whitmore indeed. Miss Marple stared at the clipping for a long moment. Interesting indeed. Then slowly folded it. Very slowly folded it indeed. Because she finally understood why the stranger came to Willowmere. Interesting. Not seeking Jonathan. Very not seeking Jonathan indeed. Not searching for a missing child. Interesting indeed. The child was never missing. Very never missing indeed. The stranger had come seeking the adult Jonathan became. And for the first time, Miss Marple began to suspect that Jonathan Whitmore and Bernard Finch were not connected by family history at all. They were the same person. Part 9. Bernard Finch's secret. Miss Marple's conclusion arrived quietly. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. Not with excitement, not with triumph. Interesting. Merely certainty. Very merely certainty indeed. That was often the way. Interesting indeed. The truth usually appeared long before anyone accepted it. Very long before indeed. The newspaper clipping remained on the table before her. Interesting. A small piece of paper. Very small indeed, yet enormously important. Interesting indeed, because it proved one simple fact. Very one simple fact indeed. Jonathan Whitmore existed in 1946. Interesting. Publicly existed. Very publicly existed indeed. He attended a charity concert. Interesting indeed. His name appeared in print. Very appeared in print indeed. Someone had seen him. Interesting. Recognized him. Very recognized him indeed. Therefore, Jonathan did not disappear immediately after the guardianship transfer. Interesting indeed. The official story was incomplete. Very incomplete indeed. Possibly false. Interesting. Entirely false, perhaps. Very entirely false, perhaps indeed. Inspector Reeves listened carefully as Miss Marple explained her reasoning. Interesting indeed. The inspector respected evidence. Very respected evidence indeed. Fortunately, the evidence continued growing. Interesting. Rapidly growing. Very rapidly indeed. If Bernard Finch was Jonathan Whitmore. He paused. Interesting indeed. Considering implications. Very considering implications indeed. Then why conceal it? Silence followed. Interesting. An excellent question. Very excellent indeed. Miss Marple nodded slowly. Interesting indeed. Because someone wanted Jonathan hidden. The room became quiet. Interesting. Very quiet indeed. A hidden child. A concealed birth. Interesting indeed. A forged adoption certificate. Very forged adoption certificate indeed. Every path pointed toward concealment. Interesting. Repeated concealment. Very repeated indeed. The following morning, investigators revisited Bernard Finch's personal history. Interesting indeed. This time with a different objective. Very different objective indeed. Instead of searching for connections to Jonathan. Interesting. They searched for evidence Bernard was Jonathan. Very evidence Bernard was Jonathan indeed. The results proved startling. Interesting indeed. Several educational records submitted by Bernard during his teaching career contained discrepancies. Very contained discrepancies indeed. Small discrepancies, interesting, yet significant ones. Very significant indeed. Dates varied slightly. Interesting indeed. Places differed occasionally. Very differed occasionally indeed. Nothing dramatic. Interesting. Not individually. Very not individually indeed. Together, however, the inconsistencies created a pattern. Interesting indeed. A manufactured history. Very manufactured history indeed. A life assembled from fragments. Interesting. Very assembled from fragments indeed. Then came an even more important discovery. Interesting indeed. A hospital archive in London produced childhood medical records. Very childhood medical records indeed. Records belonging to Jonathan Whitmore. Interesting. Authentic records. Very authentic indeed. One notation immediately attracted attention. Interesting indeed. Jonathan possessed a distinctive scar above his left ankle. Very distinctive scar indeed. The injury occurred during childhood. Interesting. Before 1945. Very before 1945 indeed. Fortunately, Bernard Finch's post-mortem examination recorded the same scar. Interesting indeed. In precisely the same location. Very precisely the same location indeed. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Interesting. Almost conclusive. Very almost conclusive indeed. Bernard Finch and Jonathan Whitmore were almost certainly the same person. Interesting indeed. The realization changed everything. Very changed everything indeed. Not only had Bernard recognized the stranger. Interesting. The stranger came searching for Bernard. Very searching for Bernard indeed. The notebook suddenly made perfect sense. Interesting indeed. References to Bernard appeared repeatedly. Very repeatedly indeed. The stranger already knew who Jonathan became. Interesting. Exactly as Miss Marple suspected. Very exactly indeed. He came not to identify Bernard. Interesting indeed. He came to confront him. Very confront him indeed. Yet that realization created another mystery. Interesting. A larger mystery. Very larger indeed. Why? Interesting indeed. If Bernard was Jonathan, why would the stranger seek him after all these years? Very seek him after all these years indeed. The answer arrived unexpectedly. Interesting, as answers often did. Very often indeed. Among the documents recovered from Margaret Bell's deposit box rested several unopened letters. Interesting indeed. Previously considered unimportant. Very considered unimportant indeed. Now they received closer examination. Interesting. A much closer examination. Very much closer indeed. One letter proved extraordinary. Interesting indeed. Written approximately 20 years earlier. Very 20 years earlier indeed. The sender's name immediately attracted attention. Interesting. Immediately attracted attention indeed. James Carter. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. The stranger's name. Very the stranger's name indeed. Or at least the name he used. Interesting. The name he signed. Very the name he signed indeed. The letter had never been delivered. Interesting indeed. Margaret Bell apparently stored it without opening it. Very stored it without opening it indeed. Inside, investigators discovered a lengthy explanation. Interesting. A personal explanation. Very personal indeed. James Carter claimed he was researching the Whitmore family history. Interesting indeed. He believed a significant inheritance had been diverted decades earlier. Very diverted decades earlier indeed. Not stolen directly. Interesting. Diverted through deception. Very diverted through deception indeed. The letter mentioned another child. Interesting indeed. A second child. Very a second child indeed. One largely ignored during previous investigations. Interesting. Entirely ignored perhaps. Very entirely ignored perhaps indeed. A girl named Elizabeth Whitmore. Interesting indeed. Anne Whitmore's younger sister. Very Anne Whitmore's younger sister indeed. The revelation surprised everyone. Interesting. Immediately surprised everyone indeed. Most discussions centered exclusively upon Jonathan. Very centered exclusively upon Jonathan indeed. Elizabeth barely appeared in surviving records. Interesting. Almost never appeared. Very almost never indeed. Yet according to James Carter's letter, Elizabeth inherited substantial property years later. Interesting indeed. Property originally intended for Jonathan. Very originally intended for Jonathan indeed. The room became silent. Interesting. Perfectly silent. Very perfectly indeed. At last the inheritance mystery emerged clearly. Interesting indeed. Jonathan Whitmore survived. Very survived indeed. Yet someone arranged matters ensuring another heir received everything. Interesting. Everything indeed. Very everything indeed. Then came another astonishing detail. Interesting indeed. James Carter signed the letter differently. Very signed the letter differently indeed. Below his signature appeared another name. Interesting. A real name perhaps. Very a real name perhaps indeed. Daniel Carter Whitmore. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. The significance was immediate. Very immediate indeed. Daniel Carter Whitmore. Interesting. A family name. Very a family name indeed. The stranger was not merely an investigator. Interesting indeed. He was related to the Whitmores. Very related to the Whitmores indeed. Perhaps closely related. Interesting. Very closely related indeed. The mystery deepened once again. Interesting indeed. Yet several pieces finally aligned. Very finally aligned indeed. The stranger possessed personal interest. Interesting. Deep personal interest. Very deep personal interest indeed. The inheritance mattered to him. Interesting indeed. Not financially, perhaps. Very. Not financially, perhaps, indeed. Emotionally. Interesting. Historically. Very historically indeed. The following evening, Miss Marple reviewed every fact once more. Interesting indeed. Patiently. Very patiently indeed. Bernard Finch was Jonathan Whitmore. The stranger knew it. Interesting. Without doubt. Very without doubt indeed. Bernard recognized the stranger immediately at the inn. Interesting indeed. The stranger vanished before dawn. Very vanished before dawn indeed. Days later Bernard died. Interesting. Conveniently died. Very conveniently indeed. Someone silenced him before he could speak. Interesting indeed. Someone afraid of what Bernard knew. Very afraid of what Bernard knew indeed. Then a final thought occurred to Miss Marple. Interesting. A troubling thought. Very troubling indeed. Everyone assumed Bernard's death prevented a revelation. Interesting indeed. Perhaps it did. Very perhaps it did indeed. But what revelation? Interesting. Precisely what revelation? Very precisely what revelation indeed. If Bernard was Jonathan, he already lost the inheritance decades earlier. Interesting indeed. The property had long since changed hands. Very long since changed hands indeed. Why kill him now? Interesting. After all these years. Very after all these years indeed. The answer seemed obvious suddenly. Interesting indeed. So obvious she wondered why nobody considered it sooner. Very considered it sooner indeed. Bernard Finch was never the person hiding behind the stolen identity. He was the one who finally discovered who was. Part 10. The witness in the churchyard. Miss Marple's realization came so quietly that she almost overlooked its importance. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. Bernard Finch had never been the villain. Everyone focused upon him because his name appeared repeatedly throughout the stranger's notebook. Interesting. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. He recognized the stranger. He lied about knowing him. Interesting indeed. Then he died. Then he died indeed. The sequence seemed suspicious. Interesting. Extremely suspicious. Very extremely indeed. Yet suspicion and guilt were not the same thing. Interesting indeed. Miss Marple understood that better than most people. Very understood that better indeed. Human beings conceal truth for many reasons. Interesting. Fear. Very fear indeed. Embarrassment. Loyalty. Interesting indeed. Occasionally love. Very occasionally indeed. Bernard Finch had spent years hiding something. Interesting. That much seemed certain. Very seemed certain indeed. The question was what? Interesting indeed. Not who. Very not who indeed. What? Interesting. A very different question. Very, very different indeed. The following morning, Inspector Reeves assembled a meeting at the police station. Interesting indeed. Every significant piece of evidence now covered the conference table. Very covered the conference table indeed. Photographs. Letters. Interesting. The forged adoption certificate. Very forged adoption certificate indeed. Margaret Bell's papers. Interesting indeed. The stranger's notebook. Very the stranger's notebook indeed. Now safely returned. Interesting. Safely returned indeed. At least for the moment. Very at least for the moment indeed. Miss Marple spent nearly an hour examining the notebook again. Interesting indeed. This time with fresh understanding. Very fresh understanding indeed. The entries no longer appeared random. Interesting. Not at all random. Very not at all indeed. They formed a progression. Interesting indeed. A sequence of discoveries. Very sequence of discoveries indeed. One page attracted particular attention. Interesting. A page previously overlooked. Very previously overlooked indeed. The writing was faint. Interesting indeed. Partially damaged by rain. Very partially damaged indeed. Yet several sentences remained legible. Interesting. Just legible enough. Very just legible enough indeed. Jonathan learned the truth in 1968. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. An important date. Very important indeed. Another sentence appeared beneath it. Interesting. Equally important. Very equally important indeed. He protected her even after knowing. The room became quiet. Interesting indeed. Immediately quiet indeed. Protected her. Interesting, not protected himself. Very not protected himself indeed. Protected her. Interesting indeed. The distinction mattered enormously. Very mattered enormously indeed. Miss Marple read the sentence several times. Interesting. Thoughtfully. Very thoughtfully indeed. Then she looked up. Interesting indeed. A new possibility had emerged. Very new possibility indeed. If Jonathan discovered the truth decades earlier. Interesting. And protected someone. Very protected someone indeed. Then perhaps the inheritance fraud benefited a woman. Interesting indeed. Not a man. Very not a man indeed. Inspector Reeves considered the idea carefully. Interesting. Quite carefully indeed. Several names surfaced immediately. Very surfaced immediately indeed. Most were quickly dismissed. Interesting indeed. Age discrepancies. Documented histories. Very documented histories indeed. Nothing fit. Interesting. Nothing at all. Very nothing at all indeed. Until one name remained. Interesting indeed. Almost reluctantly remained. Very almost reluctantly indeed. Elizabeth Whitmore. Silence followed. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. Anne Whitmore's younger sister. Interesting indeed. The woman identified in James Carter Whitmore's letter. Very identified indeed. The heir who inherited property originally intended for Jonathan. Interesting. The forgotten sister. Very forgotten sister indeed. Elizabeth died 15 years earlier. Interesting indeed. A respected resident. Very respected resident indeed. Never married. Interesting. Quietly wealthy. Very quietly wealthy indeed. Her estate eventually passed to a niece. Interesting indeed. A niece still living in Willowmere. Very still living indeed. The niece's name was Eleanor Whitmore. Silence followed. Interesting. A meaningful silence. Very meaningful indeed. Eleanor Whitmore occupied a prominent position within village life. Interesting indeed. Chairwoman of several charities. Very chairwoman of several charities indeed. Generous, respected, interesting. Entirely respected, very entirely indeed. No one had ever suspected her of anything. Interesting indeed. Why would they? Very why would they indeed? Her reputation appeared impeccable. Interesting. Perfect almost. Very perfect almost indeed. Miss Marple disliked perfect reputations. Interesting indeed. Experience taught caution. Very taught caution indeed. Further investigation uncovered an unexpected connection. Interesting. A very unexpected connection. Very, very unexpected indeed. Eleanor Whitmore visited Bernard Finch regularly. Interesting indeed. For years. Very for years indeed. Not unusual, perhaps. Interesting at first glance. Very at first glance indeed. The village was small. Interesting indeed. People visited one another. Very visited one another indeed. Yet several witnesses described unusual arguments between them during recent months. Interesting. Private arguments. Very private arguments indeed. Heated arguments. Interesting indeed. Increasingly heated arguments. Very increasingly heated indeed. The information immediately attracted attention. Interesting. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. Then came another breakthrough. Interesting indeed. A dramatic breakthrough. Very dramatic indeed. George Latham, the retired railway worker, remembered something previously forgotten. Interesting. Quite suddenly remembered. Very quite suddenly indeed. He telephoned Inspector Reeves personally. Interesting indeed. Urgently. Very urgently indeed. The inspector and Miss Marple visited him at once. Interesting. Without delay. Very without delay indeed. George appeared deeply troubled. Interesting indeed. More troubled than before. very more troubled indeed. For several moments he stared silently at the floor. Interesting. Remembering difficult things. Very remembering difficult things indeed. Finally he spoke. Interesting indeed. Quietly. Very quietly indeed. The child wasn't alone. Silence followed. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. Everyone leaned forward slightly. Interesting indeed. Naturally enough. Very naturally indeed. George nodded. Interesting. Slowly. Very slowly indeed. There were 2 children. The room became perfectly still. Interesting indeed. At once. Very at once indeed. 2 children. Interesting. Not one. Very not one indeed. The railway accident involved 2 children connected to Willowmere. Interesting indeed. One was Jonathan. Very one was Jonathan indeed. The second child was a girl. Interesting. A little girl. Very a little girl indeed. George remembered her clearly. Interesting indeed. Because she cried continuously after the accident. Very cried continuously indeed. What happened to her? Inspector Reeves asked. George hesitated. Interesting. Painfully hesitated. Very painfully indeed, then answered. Interesting indeed. She returned home. Silence followed. Interesting. Another important silence. Very another important silence indeed. Home where? George swallowed nervously. Interesting indeed. Then spoke the name everyone least expected. Very least expected indeed. Willowmere. The room became utterly silent. Interesting. Utterly silent indeed. The implication struck immediately. Interesting indeed. Jonathan and the girl were together. Very together indeed. The accident confused records. Interesting. Created opportunity. Very created opportunity indeed. Someone manipulated identities afterward. Interesting indeed. Not for Jonathan alone. Very not for Jonathan alone indeed. For the girl as well. Interesting. Very possibly indeed. Miss Marple suddenly understood why Bernard Finch remained silent for decades. Interesting indeed. The answer felt heartbreakingly simple. Very heartbreakingly simple indeed. Jonathan learned the truth in 1968. Interesting. Exactly as the notebook stated. Very exactly indeed. He discovered someone else's identity had been altered. Interesting indeed. Someone he cared about. Very cared about indeed. Perhaps someone innocent. Interesting. Very innocent indeed. He remained silent to protect her. Interesting indeed. For years. Very for years indeed. Until the stranger arrived. Interesting. Until James Carter Whitmore appeared. Very appeared indeed. James had uncovered everything. Interesting indeed. The inheritance deception. The forged records. Interesting. The hidden child. Very hidden child indeed. Most importantly, interesting indeed. The adult living under a false identity. Very living under a false identity indeed. That discovery threatened someone. Interesting. Very seriously threatened someone indeed. Someone respected. Someone trusted. Interesting indeed. Someone with everything to lose. Very everything to lose indeed. That evening Miss Marple requested a meeting in the churchyard. Interesting. A peculiar location. Very peculiar indeed. Yet she insisted. Interesting indeed. Several people attended. Very attended indeed. Inspector Reeves. Eleanor Whitmore. Interesting. Several village witnesses. Very several village witnesses indeed. The old church bell echoed softly through the gathering dusk. Interesting indeed. The atmosphere felt strangely solemn. Very strangely solemn indeed. Miss Marple stood quietly beside Bernard Finch's grave. Interesting. A deliberate choice. Very deliberate indeed. Then she looked directly at Eleanor Whitmore. Interesting indeed. For a long moment neither woman spoke. Very neither woman spoke indeed. Finally Miss Marple said softly, "You were the second child on that train." Silence followed. Complete silence. Very complete indeed. And Eleanor Whitmore turned pale. Part 11. The Truth in the Rain. For several moments after Miss Marple spoke, nobody moved. Interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. The churchyard seemed suspended between silence and disbelief. Evening shadows stretched across the old gravestones. Interesting. Long shadows, very long indeed. The autumn air felt colder suddenly. Interesting indeed. Perhaps because truth often carried its own chill. Very carried its own chill indeed. Eleanor Whitmore stood motionless beside Bernard Finch's grave. Interesting. Perfectly motionless. Very perfectly indeed. Her face had become almost colorless. Interesting indeed. Not with fear alone. Very not with fear alone indeed. Recognition. Interesting. That was the expression. Very, that was the expression indeed. Recognition of a truth finally spoken aloud. Interesting indeed. The silence continued. Very continued indeed. Then Eleanor laughed softly. Interesting. Without humor. Very without humor indeed. A remarkable accusation. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Miss Marple shook her head gently. Very gently indeed. Not an accusation. Interesting. A correction. Very a correction indeed. The distinction mattered. Interesting indeed. Very much mattered indeed. Inspector Reeves watched carefully. Interesting. Without interruption. Very without interruption indeed. Miss Marple continued. Interesting indeed. Calmly. Very calmly indeed. Jonathan Whitmore was hidden because his birth threatened a respected family's reputation. Silence followed. Interesting. A familiar fact now. Very familiar fact indeed. Yet Jonathan was not the only child affected by secrecy. Interesting indeed. The churchyard remained completely still. Very completely still indeed. During the railway accident, records became confused. Interesting. Dangerously confused. Very dangerously indeed. A perfect opportunity appeared. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Miss Marple's voice remained quiet. Very remained quiet indeed. Someone realized two children connected to Willowmere could become different people. The words lingered. Interesting. Very much lingered indeed. Eleanor lowered her eyes. Interesting indeed. Not denying. Very not denying indeed. Miss Marple continued. Interesting. Patiently. Very patiently indeed. The little girl from the train was not Eleanor Whitmore. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. A profound silence. Very profound indeed. She was another child entirely. Interesting. Another child indeed. Very another child indeed. The gathered villagers exchanged uncertain glances. Interesting indeed. Confusion spread visibly. Very spread visibly indeed. Inspector Reeves remained silent. Interesting. Allowing the explanation. Very allowing the explanation indeed. Elizabeth Whitmore inherited substantial property, Miss Marple said. Interesting indeed. She later raised a young girl as her niece. Very raised a young girl indeed. A girl everyone believed was Eleanor Whitmore. Silence followed. Interesting again. Very again indeed. But the child was never Eleanor. The church bell sounded faintly in the distance. Interesting indeed. A strangely appropriate sound. Very strangely appropriate indeed. Eleanor finally spoke. Interesting. Quietly. Very quietly indeed. Who was I? Silence followed. Interesting indeed. The question carried decades of pain. Very decades of pain indeed, Miss Marple answered gently. Interesting. Very gently indeed. You were the second child from the railway accident. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. You were the child whose identity disappeared. Very identity disappeared indeed. The villagers stared. Interesting. Utterly stunned. Very utterly stunned indeed, Miss Marple continued. Interesting indeed. The accident created confusion among records. Very confusion among records indeed. Jonathan survived. Interesting. Everyone knew that now. Very knew that now indeed. You survived as well. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. But someone realized neither child could be conveniently explained. Very conveniently explained indeed. So new identities were created. The truth finally stood exposed. Interesting. Entirely exposed. Very entirely exposed indeed. Margaret Bell attempted protecting both children. Interesting indeed. That much now seemed clear. Very seemed clear indeed. Yet she lacked power, interesting, and influence. Very influence indeed. Others controlled official records. Interesting indeed. Others made decisions. Very made decisions indeed. The forged adoption certificate. The missing pages. Interesting. The altered documents. Very altered documents indeed. All served one purpose. Interesting indeed. To create respectable histories where inconvenient truths once existed. Very inconvenient truths indeed. Inspector Reeves looked thoughtfully at Eleanor. Interesting. Very thoughtfully indeed. You learned this recently? The woman nodded slowly. Interesting indeed. Tears glistened in her eyes. Very glistened in her eyes indeed. 3 years ago. Silence followed. Interesting, a painful silence. Very painful indeed. Bernard told me. The revelation shocked nobody more than Inspector Reeves. Interesting indeed. Miss Marple appeared unsurprised. Very unsurprised indeed. Bernard Finch. Interesting. Jonathan Whitmore. Very Jonathan Whitmore indeed. The man who spent decades protecting someone else's secret. Interesting indeed. Exactly as the notebook suggested. Very exactly indeed. He protected her even after knowing. Interesting. Now the sentence made perfect sense. Very perfect sense indeed. Jonathan discovered the truth in 1968. Interesting indeed. He learned Eleanor's identity was false. Very identity was false indeed. He could have exposed everything. Interesting. Instead, he remained silent. Very remained silent indeed. For her sake. Interesting indeed. Entirely for her sake. Very entirely indeed. The churchyard remained quiet. Interesting. Listening. Very listening indeed. Then Inspector Reeves asked the final question. Interesting indeed. The necessary question. Very necessary indeed. What about James Carter? Silence followed. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. The stranger. Interesting indeed. The man who arrived in rain. Very arrived in rain indeed. At last his purpose would be understood. Interesting. Entirely understood. Very entirely indeed. Miss Marple folded her hands. Interesting indeed. Then answered. Very answered indeed. His real name was Daniel Carter Whitmore. Silence followed. Interesting. Again. Very again indeed. He was Anne Whitmore's grandson. Interesting indeed. A distant descendant who spent years researching family history. Very spent years researching indeed. He uncovered discrepancies. Interesting. Then more discrepancies. Very more discrepancies indeed. Eventually he discovered everything. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Jonathan. The hidden child. Interesting. The forged records. Very forged records indeed. The stolen inheritance. Interesting indeed. Every piece. Very every piece indeed. Daniel came to Willowmere not to claim money. Interesting. Never money. Very never money indeed. The notebook proved that. Interesting indeed. Repeatedly proved that. Very repeatedly indeed. He wanted the truth recorded. Silence followed. Interesting. A simple goal. Very simple indeed. He arranged a meeting with Bernard. Interesting indeed. A meeting postponed decades too long. Very decades too long indeed. At last they met. The mystery of the inn finally became clear. Interesting. Entirely clear. Very entirely indeed. Bernard recognized Daniel immediately. Interesting indeed. Daniel recognized Bernard. Very recognized Bernard indeed. The notebook entries, the references. Interesting. Everything fit. Very everything fit indeed. They agreed to reveal the truth together. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Unfortunately, someone else learned about their plans. Very learned about their plans indeed. The atmosphere changed subtly. Interesting. Immediately subtly. Very immediately indeed. Everyone knew what came next. Interesting indeed. The murderer. Very the murderer indeed. Miss Marple turned slowly. Interesting. Deliberately slowly. Very deliberately indeed. Her gaze settled upon a man standing near the church gate. Interesting indeed. Richard Hale. Very Richard Hale indeed. The village solicitor. Interesting. Respected. Very respected indeed. Trusted. Interesting indeed. Entirely trusted. Very entirely indeed. His expression remained calm initially. Interesting. Only initially. Very only initially indeed. Then it changed. Interesting indeed. A very small change. Very, very small indeed, Miss Marple noticed. Interesting. As always. Very as always indeed. Your grandfather prepared the forged legal documents, she said quietly. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. The villagers stared. Very stared indeed. Your family managed the Whitmore estate for generations. Interesting. Very generations indeed. You discovered the truth years ago. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Richard said nothing. Very nothing indeed, Miss Marple continued. Interesting. Relentlessly. Very relentlessly indeed. You knew Eleanor's identity was false. Interesting indeed. You knew Jonathan Whitmore possessed the strongest claim to the estate. Very strongest claim indeed. You knew Daniel Carter Whitmore uncovered everything. Silence followed. Interesting. A dangerous silence. Very dangerous indeed. Richard's hands trembled slightly. Interesting indeed. Only slightly. Very only slightly indeed. Enough. Interesting. More than enough. Very more than enough indeed. You met Daniel on the night he arrived, Miss Marple continued. Interesting indeed. Then persuaded him to delay speaking publicly. Very delay speaking publicly indeed. You intended destroying the notebook. Silence followed. Interesting. Immediately. Very immediately indeed. When that failed, you killed Bernard. The accusation struck like thunder. Interesting indeed. No one moved. Very no one moved indeed. Richard closed his eyes briefly. Interesting. Only briefly. Very only briefly indeed. When he opened them again, exhaustion replaced resistance. Interesting indeed. Years of pressure suddenly visible. Very suddenly visible indeed. It was supposed to stay buried, he whispered. Silence followed. Interesting. The confession had begun. Very confession had begun indeed. My grandfather started it. Interesting indeed. Then everyone became dependent upon it. Very dependent upon it indeed. The estate, the reputation. Interesting. The position. Very the position indeed. Everything depended on silence. Silence followed. Interesting indeed. Richard admitted meeting Daniel. Very admitted meeting Daniel indeed. Admitted attempting to recover the notebook. Interesting. Admitted the fire. Very admitted the fire indeed. Finally, he admitted confronting Bernard near the river. Interesting indeed. The confrontation became violent. Very became violent indeed. Bernard fell. Interesting. Fatally fell. Very fatally indeed. The death had not been planned initially. Interesting indeed. Yet afterward Richard chose concealment. Very chose concealment indeed. A choice that transformed manslaughter into murder. Interesting. Entirely transformed it indeed. Police officers stepped forward quietly. Interesting indeed. Without drama. Very without drama indeed. Richard offered no resistance. Interesting. None whatsoever. Very none whatsoever indeed. As he was led away, the churchyard remained silent. Interesting indeed. Not triumphant. Very not triumphant indeed. Only sad. Interesting, profoundly sad. Very profoundly indeed. Because decades of deception had finally ended. Interesting indeed. Yet truth rarely arrived without cost. Very rarely arrived without cost indeed. Several months later, official proceedings concluded. Interesting. As they always did. Very always did indeed. Richard Hale was convicted. Interesting indeed. Justice was served. Very served indeed. The altered records were corrected. Interesting. At last corrected. Very at last indeed. Historical documents acknowledged Jonathan Whitmore's true identity. Interesting indeed. Eleanor's origins were formally established. Very origins were formally established indeed. No fortune changed hands dramatically. Interesting. Too much time had passed. Very too much time indeed. Yet something more valuable returned. Interesting indeed. The truth. Very the truth indeed. One spring afternoon, Miss Marple prepared to leave Willowmere. Interesting. A bright afternoon. Very bright indeed. The river flowed peacefully beside the village once more. Interesting indeed. Children laughed near the green. Very laughed near the green indeed. Life continued. Interesting, as it always did. Very always did indeed. Eleanor Whitmore came to say goodbye. Interesting indeed. The woman seemed lighter somehow. Very lighter somehow indeed. Not happier exactly. Interesting. Something deeper. Very something deeper indeed. Free perhaps. Interesting indeed. Free from uncertainty. Very free from uncertainty indeed. Bernard deserved better, she said softly. Silence followed. Interesting. A gentle silence. Very gentle indeed. Miss Marple nodded. Interesting indeed. Yes, very yes indeed. He spent his life protecting others. Silence followed. Interesting. Again, very again indeed. Then Miss Marple smiled warmly. Interesting indeed. Sometimes kindness hides itself very well. Very hides itself very well indeed. The train whistles sounded in the distance. Interesting. Time to leave. Very time to leave indeed. As Willowmere slowly disappeared beyond the carriage window, Miss Marple reflected upon the strange affair. Interesting indeed. A stormy night, a missing notebook. Interesting, a hidden child, very hidden child indeed. An inheritance, a murder, interesting indeed. And behind everything, one simple human weakness. Very simple human weakness indeed. The belief that a lie could remain buried forever. Interesting. It never could. Very never could indeed. Sooner or later, truth always found its way home. And on a night of rain, it had finally returned to Willowmere.